In today's video, I'll be installing the Koyo n-flo 53mm core radiator on my Mazda Rx8. This is the largest radiator you can fit on your Rx8 that will actually fit on the OEM mounting locations. If you want your temperatures to drop on the street, but especially on the track, this radiator will do the job and do it brilliantly. I'll post the link to it and other Koyo radiators in the description. So hit the like button, subscribe if you're new here, and let's start the install. Firstly, disconnect the battery and take it out. Remove the bolt holding down the battery box and take it out. Now remove the top cover by pushing in the bottom part all around, and once released, take it out. Next, remove the two 10mm bolts holding the side of the bracket in place. Use your 10mm key to release them and then take them out. After that, take out the bottom battery bracket. Release the lug nuts on your left passenger wheel. When done, jack up the front of the car and put it on jack stands. Now take out the lug nuts and remove the wheel. After that, I'll use this prying tool to pry out all the plastic pins holding down this plastic. When done, I can take it out. Now there are two bolts on each side of the upper part of the bumper. I'll use my ratchet to release them, but for now I'll take out only the two front ones and leave the rear ones in just a bit so that they hold the bumper. Next up, let's move under the front side of the bumper. Take out all the front bolts, which are shown by these arrows. Now I'm gonna remove the side pins holding the bumper in place. And here we go, nice and loose. Now there's a screw hidden at the bottom of the side indicator. I'll simply unscrew it with my screwdriver and take it out. Now it's time to push down on the blinker to detach it and then take out the side of the bumper. Just like that. Next, I'll slide out the side indicator. Now that it's out, I just have to turn the bulb to take it out and feed it out of the bumper. And repeat the exact same process on the other side of the bumper. Now that both sides of the bumper are released, we can remove the two bolts holding the bumper in the middle and carefully start removing it. If I had fog lights, I'd have to disconnect the connectors first. Next up, it's time to remove the plastic under tray. And to start, you must remove the two plastic clips on the passenger left side. The plastic clip and bolt on the rear left side. The ones on the rear right side. The two plastic clips on the right side. And the two bolts holding the rear top part of the tray near the wheels. While there, unclip this wire from the tray so that it's loose. Do this on both sides. Next, if we take a look under this part, take out the remaining two clips holding the top part of the tray in place. Along with that, all the connectors still attached on the under tray. Do this on both sides. When done, simply pull down the tray from the front and take it out. Put an extension with a 10mm socket on your ratchet and start releasing the two bolts holding down your coolant bottle. When done, unscrew them with your hands and take them out. Next, slide out the gray plastic connector from the bottle. Use your bent nose pliers to release this clamp from the hose under the bottle. An important note is that the plastic hose from the radiator where the rubber tube hose from the bottle connects is very prone to snap off, and it also did when I was installing mine. Next up, unclip the hose from the connectors and put the bottle on the side. Now remove the two fan connectors by pushing the central clip down and pulling them apart. To make things easier, I use my bent nose pliers to disconnect the right connector. Now simply push the black connector to the right so that it slides out of the bracket. Next, disconnect the two steering connectors. Cut away any plastic clamps that are holding the main wire harness in place. Take a crosshead screwdriver and remove the plastic bolt holding the air duct where the battery was. Disconnect the black AC connector. Release the bolt holding the bracket in place and take it out. Now you want to gently and carefully push the metal AC pipe out of the fan housing. Next, take out the plastic air duct going to the ECU. Now go under the front side of the car and locate this bracket with two 12mm bolts holding it in place. Take your ratchet and remove the two bolts on each of the two brackets. You may find some bolts really challenging to get out, so before you start dealing with rounded bolts, I suggest you get a set of special sockets that are capable of removing rounded or difficult bolts, so you'll be sure to get them out no matter the challenge. I'll put a link to these nuts in the description. And there we go, the bolt is out and the bracket is loose. Now unclip the bottom plastic clamp holding the wire harness in place. Take a screwdriver and remove the plastic bolt holding the battery air duct in place. When done, take it out. Now use a ratchet with 10mm socket to remove this bolt holding the negative terminal of the harness in place. With that done, it's time to secure the AC condenser by zip tying the top pipes. This way we'll add extra support when the radiator will be removed. Don't go crazy with the tightness here, tighten just enough to hold them. Next, take your bent nose pliers and slide up the clamp on the lower radiator hose. When done, take a hose pick and work it on the internal part of the hose to get it loose. Next, release the clamp on the other part of the same hose and then rotate it a bit and pull it out. Once out, pull it out on the other side of the engine bay and now wiggle it, twist and pull it until you get it out. Release the clamp on the upper radiator hose, slide it back and take out the hose. Secure the hose with a zip tie like this to ensure leftover coolant does not spill out. Now it's time to remove the upper front radiator bolts, which are located where you see my zip tie. If you have a cold air intake like me, remove the bottom part first to gain more space to easily remove the right upper front bolt. Next up, remove the two lower radiator bolts. The removal of these bolts can get quite tricky, as the first time I did it, they were spinning around in place, so I had to use an angle grinder to cut them out. Now it's time to remove the upper radiator nuts, which are these two shown by the arrows. But before doing that, remove this nut to gain more space for the removal of the left nut. Now use a ratchet with extension and swivel joint to release both nuts and take them out. With that done, carefully grab the radiator and start sliding it down. During this process, coolant will spill out of the radiator, so I suggest you get something on the floor to absorb the liquid. With the radiator on the floor, simply push the lower side towards the back of the car to release it completely, and then slowly and carefully take it out. Now remove the 4 bolts holding the fan shroud to the radiator. Unscrew and take out the 2 upper front bolts on the Koyo radiator. Now lift up the fan shroud from the old radiator and gently position it bottom first on the new Koyo one. Screw in the 2 upper bolts and then secure the lower part with 2 bolts, washers and nuts. With that done, tighten all 4 bolts with a ratchet until they are nice and snug. Next, remove the rubber boots from the old radiator and install them on the new one. Just like that. Put the electric steering connectors on the back side of the metal bar. Now carefully slide under the Koyo radiator with the bottom part facing the back and obviously the Koyo logo facing the front of the car. Position it like this and take out the upper front bolts. Now grab it from the top and gently start lifting it up until you manage to hook the 2 upper mounting points on the bolts. With that done, it's time to remove the 2 lower bolts. Next, insert the 2 upper front bolts with your hand and then tighten them with a ratchet. Now insert and tighten the 2 lower radiator bolts. Now it's time for the upper radiator nuts. Put on a washer, screw on the nut and tighten them with your ratchet. Next, bring all cables and connectors to the front. Due to the new location of the lower radiator pipe, we're gonna install this straight hose first and then a 90-degree pipe to bring it to the original inlet. Now take the long coolant tube, you don't necessarily have to pre-install the 90-degree pipe, and position it in place. Go under the car and slide a clamp on the metal radiator pipe and then slide on the coolant hose. From here on, I suggest you send your wife and children to the park because getting the clamp on the hose is gonna drive you mad. I suggest you widen the clamp a little bit more for an easier fitment. But after a while, one way or another, the clamp will eventually go on the hose and then you'll have to tighten it. Now position the lower radiator bracket in place by lifting up the radiator with one hand and screwing in the bolt with the other. When done, tighten both brackets with your ratchet. Next, take the short 90-degree hose, put on a clamp and position it where the upper part of the lower radiator hose used to be connected. Now slide on a clamp on the other side and insert the metal pipe that's connected to the long hose inside. When done, tighten the clamp and also tighten the clamp on the other side. Make sure the clamps are on nice and tight. I like to zip tie this loose coolant hose so it doesn't hit up and down when driving. Now check that the radiator drain bolt is tightened. If not, tighten it. Time to double check that all clamps are tightened. Now position the upper radiator hose in place, put on a clamp and tighten it. Next, we have to position the coolant bottle in place. Slide the lower small tube on the radiator and then tighten the clamp. If you have the T-Rex Performance hose kit like I do, put the longer hose in front of the AC condenser. Reconnect the gray connector and tighten the nuts on the coolant bottle. Now take off the stock coolant bottle cap and screw on the pressure testing coolant cap, along with the hose of the pressure pump and gauge. If you have the Koyo n-flo with the relocated lower radiator hose, you must pressure test the cooling system before putting in coolant, so you can make the needed adjustments without flushing it every time. It's also recommended to do so regardless of the radiator you put in, but if it has the stock mounting points, it's not that critical. So now it's time to pump in some air and see if I have any leaks. And the gauge does not move up, and I hear some whistling sounds coming from a hose on the engine bay. And this is the hose that is leaking air. I'm gonna tighten the clamp some more so that it seals better. So time to pressure test again. And it moves up a bit, but then it drops down afterwards pretty fast. In this case, I'm gonna use this spray bottle filled with 90% dishwashing soap and 10% water. And I'm gonna spray it on all the places where the radiator hoses I installed today are connected, or better, where clamps were installed. So time to wet them hose really good, and after pressure testing again, I saw bubbles coming out of the lower radiator hose, which means it's not sealing properly. So to address it, I had to reposition it again from the start and then tighten the clamps again. I was tempted to use two clamps for the lower hose, one at the very bottom and another one at the tip of the metal pipe. With all the clamps retightened again, it's time for yet another pressure test. And this time, my pressure of 0.9 bar has been reached. So now it needs to stay there for 30 minutes. And after 30 minutes, the pressure checked out, so now I can fill up my system with FL22 coolant, which is the recommended one to use for the RX8. I'll post the link to it in the description. So now it's time to pour it in the coolant bottle. For the next step, we have to bleed out air from the cooling system. And to do so, I will prepare a special video dedicated solely on this topic to make it nice and accurate. You will find the link in the description of this video. With the Koyo aluminum radiator, I can say goodbye to plastic hoses breaking and leaks due to plastic cracks, and hello to better cooling on the road and definitely on the track, which is already scheduled for next month. As always, all used parts will be linked in the description. And if you found this video useful, give it a like, subscribe, and check out more Rx8 videos on my channel.